With us this morning is Paul Manafort. He has worked for presidential campaigns of Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Bob Dole. Since late spring, he's been running Donald Trump's campaign. Good morning, Paul Manafort. How are you this morning?
Very good, John. Thank you, and good morning to you all.
What the heck is going on in the Trump campaign? If nobody said anything about anything, he would have been 10 points ahead.
Oh, we're doing fine. I mean, look, the campaign has got a plan. We're working the plan. The media keeps trying to get us off it by taking things that Mr. Trump is saying and exploiting them in ways that even the wildest imagination couldn't figure out. But the campaign itself, he's making trips around the country. He announced his economic plan on Monday. In the trips he's been taking into the battleground states over the course of the last week have gone very well at the local levels. And the important thing is that the voters in the states that he's visiting are getting the unfiltered message. The kind of distortions that are happening at the national level by the national media really is not impacting the local community. So we wish we would get a fairer treatment, but at the same time, we are making our points to the voters directly, and that's the most important thing.
Well, the media is really being unfair in many ways, I understand. I pointed out on one of our shows a couple weeks ago, the Washington Post wrote that he only gave $10 million to charity in the last 7 years. Now, I'm a member of the board of the Police Athletic League in New York with Donald, and just to the Police Athletic League alone, I think he gave $400,000 or $500,000. I mean, how can these newspapers or other media outlets do those kind of things?
They just make it up. I mean, there was an interesting article on the front page of the New York Times by one of its reporters saying that the news media journalists are conflicted because of their dislike for Donald Trump. And therefore, yet their need to be objective in covering the campaign, and it's caused a conundrum, to use his word. Well, that's absurd. It shouldn't cause a conundrum. Whether you like the candidate or not, you should be covering him fairly. But it was the first time at least somebody in the media was honest about the fact that they're not covering him fairly. They're bringing their own personal views and prejudices to the coverage of his campaign. I mean, when there's an interesting analysis that was done on the coverage of both the Republican convention and the Democratic convention. Now, forget your partisanship on it. The Democratic convention got 12. Well, actually, if you flip it around, the Republican convention got 12 times more negative coverage in the national media than the Democratic convention. It made 5 or 6 delegates into a chaotic convention on the Republican side, which was totally untrue. I mean, the party did come together at that convention, and at the Democratic convention, where you had half of the convention almost at arms because the Bernie Sanders people were upset with the rigged nature of the primary process, they called it a loving convention, a convention where the party unified. I mean, just that example alone, that's what we're confronted with. But we've got to recognize that, and we've got to run our campaign recognizing that, and we are. I mean, Mr. Trump last week spent the time on the campaign trail laying out his plan to cut taxes, cut regulations, grow the economy, negotiate fair trade deals, and we contrasted it with the economy under Clinton and Obama, where you've got 1.2% growth in the last quarter. You've got stagnant wages. Wages actually dropped, in the last quarter. And you've got a situation where the country, there's no productivity. Small businesses are not opening new companies. And we compared that last week. That message is going to impact the voters. We're comfortable about that. So regardless of how the national media covers us, Mr. Trump is going to take his message to the local communities, and we're confident, as we're starting to see again, the polls are coming back in our direction in the last week, and we're up in Florida by a point or two. We're up in Ohio now by a point or two. We're up in Iowa by a point. We're up in Nevada. These are states that are battleground states that the media said Trump must win. Well, in the midst of all the negative coverage, we're starting to win them again. And that's in light of the fact that the Clinton campaign and their super PACs have spent $200 million against us and we haven't even started our media advertising yet. So we're comfortable with our position. We're confident that if we we continue to focus on the need for change and define the changes Mr. Trump wants to bring it, and the fact that Hillary Clinton is anything but change. I mean, she is the establishment personified. We believe that message, as it gets out there, is going to resonate, and we're going to be able to not only close the polls, but start taking the lead in September.
It seems like even the 50 Republicans got together. It's mostly Bush related, and you worked for H.W. and H.W. Bush was one of our greatest presidents, I believe. Why such hate? Is there any way to bring it back together?
Well, first of all, these 50 are not representative of the Republican Party. I mean, these are people who are establishment types who have created a lot of the policies that, frankly, Mr. Trump is campaigning against. The war in Iraq, the way the peace was not negotiated correctly. The problems in Libya, the problems in Egypt. They also represent the neocon wing of the Republican Party, and Mr. Trump has got a policy that's much more Reagan-esque as opposed to neocon, which the neocon policy was first started under Bill Clinton and continued by George W. Bush, but personified by Obama. So, and when you also, interestingly, when you look at who some of these 50 people are, a lot of them have connections to the Clinton Foundation and have gotten contracts over the course of the last several years to do work for the Clinton Foundation or some of its subsidiaries. So it is far from an objective group. It is far from a Republican group, and it's part of the establishment that Donald Trump is running against.
Paul, September 26th, Hofstra. That's the next battleground. Is Donald going to be ready? Is Hillary going to be ready? What do you think? I mean, that's going to be a decisive debate for a lot of Americans.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what Hillary Clinton is going to be doing preparing for that, because she's got to figure ways out to justify her failed policies as Secretary of State, her failed decisions that she advised President Obama on that led to the rise of ISIS, her failed policies on Libya, on Egypt, on Syria. All these things happened under her watch. And she's going to have to figure out ways to solve that problem. She also is going to have to figure out, how she can justify an economic plan that she's put out there that raises taxes by over $1 trillion, reduces jobs, does nothing for productivity, creates more of a welfare state. I mean, these are the kind of things she's going to have to defend. Mr. Trump is going to be ready. I mean, he's anxious, actually, to debate her, because the contrasts are going to be very dramatic. And he's going to state very clearly, that he's the candidate of change. She's the candidate of special interest in the establishment. She's the one who's received over $18 million in contributions from hedge funds, while Mr. Trump has received less than $10,000. I mean, she's got to justify all these things, and it's going to be pretty hard. So I'm not sure. I'm sure she's not really looking forward to it.
Tell us, a lot of people are making comments that the Hillary people, whether are out there on television, on paid television, and Mr. Trump hasn't bought any paid television yet. What's the strategy there?
Well, that was the point I was making a little bit ago. They have spent over $200 million in about 12 states since May, and in those states, as I said a minute ago, Mr. Trump is beating her in Florida by a point, beating her in Ohio by a point or two, beating her in Iowa, beating her in Nevada. This is where she spent all this money, and we've spent none yet. We're waiting till after the Olympics. But the point is, if she spent all this money and we haven't, and we're still either even or slightly ahead, it tells you about the weakness of her candidacy, and it tells you and her message. So we are confident that when we start advertising, it's going to be simply amplifying Mr. Trump's message, a message of change and hope and jobs and lower taxes. And as that combined, paid media and earned media and campaign appearances starts to take impact, we don't think any amount of money she spends is going to matter. And there's a reason for it. I mean, because 70% of the people think she's a liar. The over 70% don't trust her. So when she says something, even no matter even using distorted images of Mr. Trump, when she makes conclusions off of that, it doesn't resonate. People don't believe her, and so that's the problem with her candidacy. She has no record to fall back on, and she has no credibility to help her build a record. And yet she's running as a part of the establishment in a year that people are saying they're fed up. They can't take it anymore. They want to throw out the establishment. And she's using letters like the one you referred to a minute ago with these 50 members of the establishment to justify her candidacy. I mean, the American people are smarter than that. They see through that. And we're comfortable that as the campaign progresses and people start paying more attention in September and October, our message is not only going to break through and broadly and deeply, but we're going to be the polls are going to be showing a surge for Mr. Trump.
Mr. Manafort, it's American people are sitting around their kitchen table drinking their strong cup of coffee. What's the last message you want to give to them?
Well, I encourage them to pay attention to what Mr. Trump is saying, and what he's talking about, and not the way Secretary Clinton is trying to distort his words. If you listen to his message of economic hope, if you listen to his message about protecting our borders, if you listen to his message of allowing immigration to have a real immigration policy where immigrants are allowed in, but they're allowed in lawfully. And when he talks about his battle against terrorists and protecting the homeland, listen to what he says, not the way the media or Mrs. Clinton are trying to distort it. And when you do, you're going to see a man who's on the side of the American people and who is just as fed up with the bureaucracy and the special interests as the American people are.
Paul Manafort, thank you so much for being with us on a Sunday morning, and you have a great weekend.
You too, John.
This is the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back after these few messages.